Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this presentation on Rwanda. My name is Francis Gatare. I'm CEO for Rwanda Mines, Petroleum and Gas Board, also Cabinet Minister responsible for the natural resources. I want to introduce to you the mining opportunities in Rwanda, but also to showcase to you the next mining business destination, Rwanda. I think we should have some slides on. Okay, very good. So I want to tell you a story about why you should consider doing mining business in Rwanda. There are several. As the moderator said, you've had in our region several places where mining activities are thriving. In Rwanda, we have been carrying out exploration to carry out an understanding of the geological underlying of our country, and also to get the geological information for the country. But we've also been putting in place a regulatory framework to provide a competitive place to do mining in Rwanda. And many of you may be familiar with the 3 T's, tantalite, tungsten ore, as well as tin, which have been coming from our region for several years. And Rwanda continues to be the prime location to provide those significant resources to the global market. We have been capturing the information of what is available now, and also mapping it out to make information available in 23 projects that we should be making available to investors that are interested in looking at this. We have very good exploration activities that we've been engaging professional companies like SRK and others to capture it, but also to make it available. All this makes Rwanda a new destination in our region for mining opportunities. The regulatory framework that we have is organized under 3 institutions. The institution that I head is responsible for collecting the geological information, for licensing and regulating the activities of mining. But we also have the Rwanda Development Board, which is the single point facilitator for all business activities in Rwanda that has been streamlining the processes for general business. The Rwanda Environment Management Authority is responsible for the environmental concerns for the mining opportunities, but we all work together under a single team to facilitate business opportunities in mining. Some of you may be already familiar with companies that operate in Rwanda. In fact, if I go back a bit, we have, for example, last year in October hosted the TIC, or Tantalum International Study Center, which carries out its annual General Assembly once a year. Maybe some of you in the room also came to Rwanda for that. We carry out a traceability program that is facilitated by the International Tin Association, a program called ITSKI, that some of you may be familiar with, that helps our mineral resources to get to the international market conflict-free and flat traceable from mine to refinery. In our exploration that we've been doing, a 3-stage exploration. We started by reviewing our entire geophysics knowledge about our geology, and also followed that up with detailed mapping of prospects across the country to capture the areas for detailed geological survey. And we have several areas that we have captured, which are very interesting for various minerals. As you can see, whether it's gold, whether it's tin, tantalum ore, or tungsten, gemstones, and now, most recently also, we have been discovering lithium ore associated with LCT pegmatites. Not surprising, because for a long time, while we've been mining tantalum ore, we were seeing traces of lithium. And recently, as we carried out detailed exploration, several discoveries are being made in the country. And so what we have here before you are opportunities for investment. especially partnering with some of the existing mines. You must understand, in Rwanda, we have had a history spanning over 100 years of mining, but most dominated by small artisanal mining operations. So what we are doing now is facilitating partnerships, consolidating some of the proven mining operations to create larger professional opportunities to deploy capital on. And we have these opportunities under 3 different levels, some in fairly advanced exploration stage, some in intermediate exploration stage, and early stage investment opportunities depending on the available geological exploration information. Thank you very much. We have the contacts there if anybody should want to have the details of all the prospects that we have at your disposal. Thank you very much.
So my first question for you, Francis, would be, if there's been over 100 years of mining, why haven't we heard of Rwanda yet? And then what are the 2 major things that you would point out that have changed that mean that investors should be interested?
Correct. So we have a long experience of mining in Rwanda, but we have always been dominated by the big mining jurisdiction next door called DRC. And for some reason, many did not know Rwanda as a major mining company, but also country, but also because we had never done sufficient exploration. And as a result, a lot of the mining activities were dominated by small artisanal miners and got to the market in small quantities as well. It's for those reasons that you haven't heard about mining in Rwanda. But recently, as we put efforts into exploration and organize ourselves, you're going to be hearing a lot more about mining operations in Rwanda.
And that's all free? All the data you've done, all the data, geophys, all that stuff, it's all free?
It's all free, and in fact, we are organizing it now. Partnership with, we have contracted the Geological Services of Finland, GTK, and many of you may be familiar with the online platform that they have for access to their information. And they're building an online platform for us to put all the information available, accessible to the investors free.
And when we did a little bit of research, we noticed that the ease of business was surprisingly very good, transparency very good. When we looked at political stability, there was a fairly significant question mark there. And just wondering what you would do to reassure investors that that's a manageable risk or a risk that's potentially improving. So it's not surprising. Many of you know the history of Rwanda. 25 years ago, we suffered the most horrific genocide in our country. Since then, we have been rebuilding the country, putting up institutions, rules and laws to organize the country and putting processes in place to regulate businesses. We live in a neighborhood that is, that is not the best neighborhood, but Rwanda as a country has been putting in place a mechanism for progress. And so that's why you can see indicators like, for example, the World Economic Forum's Competitiveness Index, the World Bank's Doing Business indicators, Transparency International, and others that are currently measuring Rwanda among the best on the continent. So all these are efforts to make Rwanda a better country, a country governed by rule of law and others. But we still have many things we want to improve on to continue to make Rwanda very competitive. And when we come here, we want to listen to investors, what their concerns might be, what the other jurisdictions do better than ourselves, so we can learn and improve them. I think all the legislation is fantastic. Obviously, the government at the moment is very keen to attract investment. I think what might concern investors or mining companies in such a long lead time industry is what politically could change. What's the political climate like at the moment, and the chances that the current very inviting regime is moved aside and a less welcoming government is installed.
So Rwanda is a stable country. Since 1994, which is 25 years ago, Rwanda has demonstrated itself to be a stable country. politically, for security, but also security of persons and properties. Perhaps what sometimes is a bias is that people who haven't been to Rwanda remember what we call sometimes the CNN effect. 25 years ago may seem like a long time, but it's always fresh in the minds of an adult. I encourage you to come and visit Rwanda and see for yourself, because Rwanda is a different country than you can imagine. But I also want to say that as a country, we uphold the rule of law, and the legislations we have in place, particularly the legislation around mining, whether it's the policy or mining code and mining regulations, they are built in such a way that they will last a long time. And I know that investors in the room are always concerned about change of law or change of policy. But Rwanda is serious about upholding the principles of supporting and facilitating doing business.
Similarly, we probably need to talk about conflict minerals, and a lot of Great Lakes jurisdictions, countries, have been criticised for their role in legitimising illegal production out of the DRC in particular. In an environment of rising ESG investment, there will be concerns about Rwanda's place in that particular issue. What's being done there to manage that, and what can you tell investors that would make them reassured about your role?
So that's a story of 10 years ago. Investors in the room may recall 2008 when the US administration put in place a rule called the Dodd-Frank law. The Dodd-Frank legislation that put in a section to do with conflict minerals, particularly around DRC, Congo, and the neighboring countries. So since that time, industry players, particularly the International Tin Association, which was called then ITRI, organized itself and put in place a mechanism for mineral traceability, the ITSCI. That mechanism traces minerals from the mine through the exporters to the international refineries. And we've been improving on that and created a really safe chain of custody process. And Rwanda has probably been the only country that can guarantee traceability of all the minerals that we put on the market, 100%. 3 Ts. So this is what was concerned with that. So the tantalum, tungsten, and tin. And today that mechanism is 10 years old, and we have been able to continue making these minerals available to the international market. In fact, what started as only one traceability program now has grown to about 3 different programs. So there is another one called, after ITSCI, there's another program called BSP, or Better Sourcing Program, and there is now a technology-based company that is introducing a new mechanism using blockchain technology. So all these are initiatives to make sure that exactly the concerns of Dodd-Frank law can be addressed.
How does that practically work? So it's the Rwanda's own production that's tracked, or how does that practically work for minerals that come into Rwanda potentially from outside its borders?
So how it practically works is that you have a team of people that follow the production of each mine, and they regularly visit and carry out audits to determine the actual volume that each mine is producing. And there are tags that have been created that can be traced from mine through the aggregating exporters up to the smelters. So every week you have teams visiting a mine and determine the production, and they tag at the mine site with a particular tag, which is a mine tag. There is an aggregator's tag, which breaks the small tags from the mines, aggregates them and uses a different tag, and then also to the smelter. So there is that chain of custody that is followed through to make sure that the pipeline is safe. Obviously, there is no process that can be 100% foolproof, and no one can guarantee that that is 100% possible. However, we can guarantee you that this mechanism works, and has created an opportunity to be able to follow through from mine all the way to the smelter.
And you alluded to having a strong legal and regulatory framework. A lot of people's experiences with permitting won't be down necessarily to the rule of law, but to technical competencies within government departments. Not having a strong mining background, how are you going to overcome that challenge?
It is a challenge indeed, and it's one reason why our sector continues to be dominated by the small artisanal miners, because only until recently we didn't have a mining school. In fact, the first cohort of Rwandan-trained geologists and mining engineers are graduating this year. So most of our technicians were either trained in the neighboring countries or outside in Europe and North America. So that has been a challenge. It has been a challenge, especially for getting talent for exploration. But now, as we open up the mining sector and we organize information available, we've been contracting international companies to do this. We've been training technicians from our technical vocational institutes to support the sector, particularly for increasing the health, safety, and production-related efficiencies. We are aiming to reduce the cost of doing business in the mining sector by reducing the regulatory costs, by reducing the entry cost to the market, and hopefully now, as we get more people trained, also to reduce the cost of expertise. What we offer, though, is the mining sector, there is low cost to operate. Because of the nature of the geology and mineralization in Rwanda, most of our minerals are near surface minerals. And so the cost of capital, the cost of infrastructure and equipment is very low and does not compare, say, with jurisdictions that have very deep mine requirements, which have high capital costs. And so that continues to make Rwanda a very competitive place to do mining at this stage in our mining history. Yeah.
I'm not sure you mentioned in this presentation, but in another one, I know you've said that there's ambitions to be a regional hub for downstream processing.
Correct.
That might ring alarm bells with some people, given what's happened in Tanzania, people familiar with Indonesia, where retrospectively legislations come in to try and force investment into downstream infrastructure. How do you plan on achieving your downstream industry?
I think investors must understand it's the wish of every mining jurisdiction to have as much value addition as can possibly be done so that you can capture value in the country and provide more employment. And that rationale is not unique to Rwanda. It's a broad aspiration for every country to try and build industries, side stream industries, downstream and backstream industries, so that you can have a fully integrated economy. And that's our aspiration as well. But we are doing it not through legislation, but through incentivization. And so we have been seeing companies now seeing opportunities to start processing. For example, we now have a new tin smelter that is beginning operation in Rwanda this year. There is revamping an old one that had been in operational for some time. We have a pipeline project now with a company from actually London that is working on a tantalum refinery. We have a gold refinery that opened only a few weeks ago. And we continue to encourage companies to set up those kinds of operations so that we can add value. In fact, when we aspire to become a regional hub for that, we are doing it in the context of the region, because we know that scale is important for processing. And so we work with our neighboring countries to allow legitimate trade in minerals for this purpose. And we think that there is a place for Rwanda, as there is a place for other minerals in other countries in our region.
Okay. We might have time for a very quick question, if anyone. Chris.
Thanks. Of course, Rwanda's landlocked. What is the best way to get a product out of Rwanda? Do you go east to Mombasa and Dar es Salaam, or do you go west through the DRC? Because it's a pretty important issue for shipping of products out of a landlocked country.
Mm. You're right. Rwanda is 1,500 kilometers from the nearest port, which is Dar es Salaam, and so that's the immediate port of export, and Mombasa is 1,700 kilometers. It's impossible to ship through the west coast. Even in DRC themselves, the eastern DRC, they ship through the eastern coast. So but now the infrastructure is good. The non-tariff barriers that traditionally many countries put in place have been lifted because we are members of the East African community. So it's a seamless movement, and in 24 hours you can more or less have your shipment already at the coast.
Very quick one.
Thanks, Francis. I understand that once you get ownership and license, and the legal framework you put in place now in Rwanda is very clear and very, very helpful to investors. How are you going to benefit from or attract people with the huge artisanal mining you have? How are you going to change that so that it attracts investors in, or is it something we've got to get our heads around when we're coming into the country, that we've then got to deal with perhaps 2,000, 3,000 artisanal miners, or are you going to try and use that to your benefit?
Mm. So we have done two things. One is, in the new mining legislation, we have created a safe space for the small and artisanal mining companies that have been traditionally mining in Rwanda by having a small-scale mining license and a medium-scale mining license for those. However, we have also created space which is going to be exclusively for the professional mining companies that are capable of deploying the kind of capital that we need. To do this, we have consolidated space that we have found to be, have similar geology, but also have similar mineralization. And companies in Rwanda, which have been in this business, have got absolutely no resistance to this. In fact, they have a huge appetite to receive capital for them to increase their operations, because we have compliance level to some of the minimum standards that is below 25%. And as regulator, the standards that we put in place for productivity, for environmental, health, and safety standards require them to reach that capital deployment that can only be brought in by international investors. All these are incentives for international capital to participate.
Francis, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it. Thank you.